I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. The other thing, and this came up, shout out to the brothers over here at BABTalk, and Barter and Build Talk, Geechee Yaw, oh, what's his brother's name? I just blanked out. Let me just move this forward here so I get and Asafo, Shaka Seku. Because indirectly through a conversation I had with them the other day on their channel about my buying power work, and I'll link to that. We had a good conversation, and their channel should be supported. Their work should be supported. They put me on to something that I had not seen that came up in the discussion. It just sort of is something that oh, you know what I meant to do? Hold up. You know what I meant to do? I meant to do anyway. But they put me on to something that supports a lot of the work that we talk about here. A story that came out last year, but that is talking about something that comes out, a report that comes out every 3 years, the Triennial Survey of Consumer Finances that was released in 2019, and it's updated every 3 years by the Federal Reserve. And there's a lot of interesting things to, and the short of it is the Federal Reserve. I'll show you the where they get, where they cobbled what I'm going to come back to in just a second. They get all of that from here. The Survey of Consumer Finances, and I'm certainly no expert in this, and have only looked at it or used it a handful of times myself. But essentially, what they do is, the method is every 3 years they survey, as they described it, different pockets of every community to assess the wealth, the income, consumption data, et cetera, and so forth. And they even talked about they make sure that no one family or person is ever spoken to twice, so that every 3 years you get a more or less accurate assessment of the condition economically of all of these different communities. And the reason that and what was done here by Matt Brunick for the People Policy Project last year was he sort of graphed some of the data that is more difficult, with a little more difficulty, pulled out of the report I just showed you. And obviously there's some obvious bits in here that again, and shout out to Diedrich Muhammad, who has talks about if you differently adjust for depreciating assets when assessing wealth, that the wealth numbers are actually much lower. But even if we just stay with these numbers here, and I don't like when they use mean, because that's average, so that doesn't really help as much. But so in fact, let me I don't like when he does that here. So I want to come back to this original report first, because the first thing that they show is just some of the basics, that wealth is still wildly unequally divided interracially. So, of course, you're going to end up with white folks with a much greater median net worth. And of course, obviously, median is the more accurate assessment used in economics and elsewhere, because half of the population is above this number and half is below, as opposed to an average, which is obviously distortable. And then what they do here is they compare the mean and the median, which is then used by them to assess the inequality within each group. But in terms of median net wealth, you see here white folks, approaching 200,000, black folks somewhere around 25,000. His so-called Hispanics a little better, and this other group, everybody else is a little bit better. But whites still have all the wealth is the point. So we that part is that wasn't for me the most compelling part. But what those brothers put, why they brought this up, that to show that wealth is very unevenly distributed within each race. So as the Federal Reserve points out, across racial lines, this is where class does become important. Across racial lines, roughly speaking, the top 20% of the group has 80% of all the wealth. So even when there's less wealth across, within a group to be discussed, that is itself unequally divided. So the top 20% of all of percent of families own around 85% of the racial group's wealth, while the bottom half of families own less than 3%. So as we will continue to do and talk a little bit more about today, whenever we're having discussions about buying power and circulating dollars and cryptocurrency and who whatever else, one incredibly important point to remember here is just this, that we're often only hearing from, even within Black America, the top 20% who own 85% of what wealth there is. And they're not talking to nor looking to help in any meaningful way the bottom half, 50%, that have less than 3% collectively of the wealth that is held within this group. Now, when they come back in 2022 for the next, we'll see if to what extent it's changed. But going back, it doesn't change much. So this is the same. This is within white America, within Black America. It's basically the same thing. You have the top 20% with 86%, 87% of all the wealth. And then the top 10% have 70% of the wealth. So we're not, we're talking about handfuls of people. The same thing in Latin America, the same thing in this so-called other group, and so on and so on and so on. And then I would have to agree, when you put it all together, what you find is that the very top of society, which owns almost all the wealth, is overwhelmingly white. The bottom half of society, which together own just 1.5% of the wealth, is thoroughly multiracial, with whites making up a slim majority. Given this arrangement of wealth in society, the no-brainer near-term solution to both class and racial inequality is to redistribute wealth from the top of society to the bottom half of society, which cuts down on both racial and class disparities simultaneously. That's a point we'll come back to. So anyway, I just wanted to quickly highlight that point because it does relate to what we're going to come back to and talk about, but it relates basically to everything, and it's constantly distorting our conversations, because even as we talk about the wild inequality interracially, the inequality intraracially is overlooked and forgotten about when it particularly comes time in Black America for us to hear conversations about what we need to do and where we can go and what our options are, et cetera, and so forth. That conversation is entirely dominated, as is the case elsewhere. So maybe it's not that specific, but that conversation is almost exclusively held by that top 20, and I would say 10% of the community. So as we talked about the other day, in looking at when with Brother Kaba and looking at Roland Martin and John Hope Bryant and their you know, paid for, funded, corporate funded, sponsored, white corporate sponsored analysis for Black economic development. We're hearing from the top 10%. We're hearing from, as he said himself, the man that owns that owns 700 homes, and as we looked up, is worth $7 million, which seems low because he said he had like 700 homes or something like that he owns and I guess rents or whatever. But the point is, that's who we're hearing from. And then they tell the rest of us, no, you be more financially literate and more responsible, because that's the problem. No, it's a structured reality that makes it this way. So anyway. So, by the way, that conversation with Barter and Build put me onto something else as well. And one of the reasons, of course, why so much of our media environment is dominated by bad economic and otherwise analysis is because, again, it's that top 10% talking to that top 10%, and in ways that only that top 10% can do it. So in the process of that conversation, the brothers put me on to let me skip down to here to this podcast, and I actually reached out to see if he would be willing to come on to the morning show, because I think it'd be a good discussion. But Real Accountant Reacts, Pocket Watchers with JT, and
how do they get on these platforms? The answer is podcast Payola. So we're gonna watch it.
So in watching his channel, and I would encourage people to check it out. He is an accountant, Howard University accountant, and a growing and very popular channel. Not radical, not revolutionary, but someone who, just a good brother, seems genuinely concerned about his community and gives really good basic economic analysis and advice. Not the kind that's going to help us have a revolution, that's going to help the collective, but the kind that on an individual level is sound and reasonable. But the reason that the brothers put me on to him is because what he does is he also breaks down a lot of the folks that I've wanted to go at. Slightly different perspective, admittedly, but he goes into the financial records of Umar Johnson, of Jay Morrison, of so many of these other folks I've never even heard of, who are, for lack of a better way of putting it, preying on poor Black people primarily. He did a great one on what's my man's name? He did a great one on I just went blank. Boyce Watkins. Oh man. And oh man. So and that's what I was. So wow, right. So the other day, off the record, I'm told, look, man, I've been trying to get you on this thing, Jared, with Boyce Watkins, and I had been trying, and some time ago he just straight up told me I don't want to do it because I don't want to be combative, and I don't want, I just come in peace, and I don't want any hostility. The suggestion, of course, that on a panel with me, it would just be hostile and combative. I saw the video that Pocket Watching with JT did, and I tweeted it out, and I said, no wonder he wouldn't want, because I would have just done this. Wouldn't have been combative, but I would have just done what, a version of what JT did, which was basically just to walk you through the argument and show how bad it is. Now, the thing I have never done that JT does, given that he's an accountant and prone to this, is he went, he pulls out all the public tax records and was just showing how, when you read them, anyone doing any due diligence would see that. And the video he was talking about in terms of Boyce Watkins in particular was Boyce Watkins' relationship with Jay Morrison, who is this guy who I came across on, because students included were saying, Dr. Ball, you say this, but look at what this brother says. And it's just selling these, literally selling you fantasies that if you pay him for, will. And remember, if folks might even remember, I said he explains how he made money, lost money, and then if you pay for his 70 plus course lesson platform, he will teach you how to do the same thing. And I was asking, well, what are you teaching people to do to build up wealth and lose it and build, and try to build it back up again? And what JT did was go through the financials and show the man, while he was bankrupt and while he was living for free in a foreclosed house, he's telling people, listen to me, I'm the super realtor, blah 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 blah. Anyway, so I encourage people to check it out. Pocket Watching with JT. It's a good channel. Something to add to your media diet. But it's this particular story that I was put onto, something I have never paid much attention to, but I want to increasingly look into. Talking about this podcast here that I had never heard of, $1 million worth of game podcast. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this. It's apparently very popular, and it's these brothers who just claim, much like these other folks, that they have all the inside scoop on how to make you, and they say in their videos, like they have this one video that's in discussion here, essentially the point was this, and the point I'm making is this: the reason so much of our analysis is bad publicly, and so much of the promoted analysis economically and otherwise is bad, is because we have a situation where, if it's not ad revenue that people are chasing, which has been my focus, that consciously or otherwise changes the content and focus in the politics, or encourages a certain focus in politics that limits the kinds of ideas and work you would bring to bear, or analysis you would bring to bear. They've pointed to something I had not really considered, which is another form of assuring that the media space is dominated or limited to very non-helpful, non-advancing analyses. And that's payola in podcasting. And payola, obviously, for those, anyone unaware, pay for play, payola, taken from the old Victrola sound systems and music playing devices from back in the day. And the idea, that was scandalized in the 50s on radio, which is, you pay a radio station or a DJ to play your artist and thereby promote them. And that is how, to this day, most art is made popular in a variety of different ways, whether it's drugs, promotions, some sort of other deal or arrangement. Dominant music outlets are paid to promote industry owned and controlled art. I did not know to what extent, I did not know at all that this was a discussion in podcasting. Obviously, there's a discussion of whether or not podcasters should pay guests to come on. But this idea, and payola has always been legal as long as you announce on air that what people are hearing has been paid for. Now, you never hear that making almost every instance of it illegal. But as Pocket Watcher with JT pointed out, in terms of, he goes into, he explains the law, but essentially that's what it is. The same thing is in play here, that the Federal Trade Commission in this case has a very similar, if not the same law, if it's not the same law that applies to both instances or both areas of media. But in terms of YouTube and elsewhere, if you are paid or given any inducement, including free, samples of a product, you must announce it. That's why you're promoting it. You cannot falsely promote it as just something you like when you're being paid or given some other inducement. And that's the case even with podcasting, apparently. So you can fall into, it just never occurred to me, because obviously nobody, who in our world would be looking at, Jared, let me slide you some money to get up on your platform. But those with hundreds of thousands and millions of followers and viewers, obviously that's a different situation. And one hit on one of those shows could make something big. So on this show here, the revealed scandal was that someone who goes by him 500. Again, none of these, I've not heard of any of these cats or none of these shows, but apparently they're very popular. They have huge audiences. And he confirmed that he went on the $1 million worth of game podcast, paying $50,000 to get on there. And then he didn't like all that he was gotten, all that he got in return, and therefore went public with it. And when you look at the clip, I'll put the link in the show notes or whatever. What it really is again, these two brothers who get on and they claim that they're giving you the inside game to capitalism. And they say, like, after you hear from him 500, if you're still broke, that's on you. And if you don't know how to figure it out, that's on you. And the reason why Pocket Watcher or Pocket Watching the Pocket Watcher got on him was because that's what he does. And similar to some of the work I've been doing, but in a more in a less politicized, more financial, professional world way. He shows, the claims these people are making about the get rich quick and the scamming the system legally and all this other stuff is fantasy. By the way, he's got a couple good episodes, at least one that I saw on the whole sovereignty issue, where a lot of cats, I remember some cat came to my house years ago, and it used to happen all the time. And it was another one of those, a version of the streets versus the PH.D thing. And all it was he was actually there with another friend. We had a mutual friend. He was coming there to get, because I was doing mixtapes at the time, and I had my CD burning stacks, and they wanted to use my stacks of burners to duplicate CDs. So while he's waiting, he just sees all my books on my bookshelf, and I think he got felt a kind of way and was like, who does he think this dude is? So he starts asking me about the sovereignty thing. You sovereign? You know about the sovereignty thing? And I was like, not really. I don't really believe in, and then he got kind of indignant and then shut me, just kind of shut down. Didn't shut me down, but shut down. Because it was like he's not rocking with this thing. And JT goes through all that. Like there is no sovereignty. Like he explains, like people have, again, taken conspiracy and fantasy and attached it to remnants of truth. But there is no, I'm sovereign, I don't have to do this, that, and the third. And conservative white folks out there do that whole thing and take that seriously, but there is no legal basis for it in any meaningful way. But so anyway, but I'm bringing all this up just to say, to point out again that this is another example again of how our media environment is manipulated to leave us with a very narrow and limited and dangerous economic analysis against which so many of us have to continue to work. So whether it's in our classrooms, as my semester starts for me tomorrow morning, but or in our activist organizing work, we come across people whose analysis of the world has been built up by people who can pay money for access to big platforms that are themselves likely sponsored by or supported by or encouraged by again, an advertising industry, an advertising world, a political world that wants Black people thinking there is no solution politically to our problems. There is no nothing other than get smart, get your money together, get your financial literacy up, and you can improve. So whether it's an advertising world and people like we were talking about Roland Martin and them chasing the $500+ billion a year ad revenue spent in the world, and therefore trying to create this mythological concoction of a conclusion that says Black people have money, can be better with money, get your credit score up, and do all this other kind of stuff. Or whether it's strictly literally people saying, I will pay you $50,000 because access to your audience to promote my paid for business scheme. Because again, what they're ultimately selling, just like the Jay Morrisons and everybody else, and the Boyce Watkins and everybody else, is pay me and I will teach you how to become wealthy. And that is at its base not only absurd and factually incorrect, but aided in its construction and design by an environment like this where this kind of thing happens. So
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like.